In permaculture and agroecology, we take into consideration the health of the people working these systems, the consumers, the environment, as well as plants and animals involved in this process.
In a biodiverse system, the soil quality improves over time, cutting inputs and making it more energy efficient.
Agroecology is common sense. It is looking at nature, trying to understand how it works, how the complementarities exist between plants, trees and animals, and reconstituting at the level of the farm these very complementarities that exist in nature between the different components of natural systems.
Most of the poor people in the world are farmers. So what we need is to find alternatives for those people to actually be able to produce and be self-sufficient or food secure.
75% food comes from small farms using only 25% of the land.
The Green Revolution promised abundance and never-ending growth, without addressing potential risk and long-term effects on our planet.
And so we developed systems that tried to reward large-scale efficiency gains, economies of scale, and increased production as their key objective. And measured by their own standards, that was extremely successful.
There are many studies across all regions that show that large farms that work in large monocropping schemes are not as productive per surface of land. The confusion comes from the fact that we calculate output by looking at one single commodity that these large farms deliver. And yes, they are productive at one single thing, but small farms combine different outputs and they are much more efficient in the way they use the resources.
Modern agriculture is an extractive system in which the soil is depleted, water is being polluted, and biodiversity kept to a bare minimum.
It has destroyed already 75% of the biodiversity, 75% of the water, 75% of the soils. And it is responsible for 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions, which is leading to climate change. So it's the biggest contributor to climate instability. But after destroying so much, it only provides 25% of the food. So it uses up 75% of the planet to provide 25% of the food. 75% food comes from small farms using only 25% of the land.
The family farms produce 70% of the food that reaches the Brazilian table. And they also give jobs to the people. This is one of the examples of our scientific research. So in our case, 74% of all people working in agriculture works in family agriculture. There is also the example of Fazenda da Toca in São Paulo. It has 2,300 hectares. They produce organic milk, eggs, fruits, vegetable, grains in agroforestry systems. We need a political reform.
We have to make a change, and it's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we live, let's change the way we eat, and let's change the way we treat each other.
Permaculture and agroecology is a global movement, combining knowledge and techniques from the past and beyond into a comprehensive science and practical design system.
Rotational grazing or cell grazing can be used with cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, chickens, turkeys, ducks and other animals. The length of time a paddock is grazed will depend on the size of the herd and the size of the paddock.
Bijvoorbeeld een stuk land waar 10 koeien kunnen grazen, kunnen ook 10 koeien en 5 schapen grazen, zonder dat dat problemen oplevert. Dat is niet het enige multifunctionele. We doen ook nog heel veel dingen naast voedselproductie. We hebben een winkel waar we spullen in verkopen. We maken ook onbewerkte producten in zeg maar kaas. We doen aan natuurbeheer, we doen aan energieopwekking, we doen aan recreatie en educatie.
Resting grazed lands allows the vegetation to renew energy reserves, rebuild shoot systems, and deepen root systems, with the result being long-term maximization biomass production. Pasture systems alone can allow grazers to meet their energy requirements. With the increased productivity of these systems, the animals obtain the majority of their nutritional needs without the supplemental feed sources that are required in continuous grazing systems.
La croissance touristique et urbaine s'accompagne par une forte demande en produits frais sur les marchés, bien loin d'être satisfaite par les producteurs locaux.
កាលពីមុនចាំតិចតួចទេប៉ុន្តែដោយតែមានរីកចម្រើនទៅចេះតែដាក់ច្រើនទៅរហូតដល់ទៅមានមេទី3កាលពីមុនដាក់តែមេ1មុនដល់នេះរហូតដល់ចាំមិនបន្តទៀតរីកចម្រើនជាងមុនបានកូនរៀនចាប់ដល់ថ្នាក់ទី12
Ils accompagnent de très petites exploitations agricoles familiales dans leur développement.
When you have crops together, you see that 1 + 1 is more than 2, right? With forests, with agroforestry, actually 1 + 1 can be 3 or 4. And also if you have the diverse farm, first of all, it becomes more stable economically, but also trees can also be habitats for natural enemies to control pests on crops. Trees can also be part of the nutrient cycling. They take nutrients from very, very deep layers in the soil, and then they bring them to their leaves, and when the leaves fall, they fertilize the soil for crops. So all those interactions are important. Those are the kinds of interactions that we want in organic farming.
It's really interesting to learn about this.
We can heal watersheds, we can manage forests in a good way, we can sequester carbon and build soil, and that can be the basis for right livelihood.
I see more and more connections, so it becomes more and more clear how the system functions. So I'd say it's growing naturally.
Silvopasture. This is one of the oldest agroforestry systems in the world, integrating trees with forage and livestock production. Such systems have the potential to increase agricultural production in the long term.
I realize that a lot of people don't have this kind of training, and a lot of folks would love to enter into that kind of a lifestyle. A lot of folks would love to do good work for the planet and have that be the job that they do 20, 30, 40 hours a week. But there's hardly any opportunities like that out there because we don't have a economy built on restoration, built on regeneration.
Usually, landowners would plant a high-value species of hardwood, and while this grows, there is a lower-value livestock component added. The animals help with clearing the brush, thus maintaining the system and fertilizing it, while trees help them with shade and moisture retention for a good regrowth of the pasture.
I suppose the ideas of active management, farming, use of the land is something that has been with me most of my adult life. It actually dates from the first discussions with Bill Mollison in 1974 that led to the permaculture concept.
Alley cropping is integrating rows of trees and shrubs next to each other on a given plot. It can be used with success even on overworked soils, where annual crops are low. By adding woody plants that will provide wind shelter, prevent erosion, and diversify farm income, annual crops are planted into wider alleys. Animals can also be integrated in this system.
បើកាលពីមុនខ្ញុំធ្វើជាសាមញ្ញខ្ញុំមិនមានទំនុកចិត្តពីព្រោះធ្វើពេលណាជួនកាលមានតិចជួនកាលមានច្រើនអត់បានប្រភេទពីការសេដ្ឋកិច្ច
ការដល់ពេលខ្ញុំបានចូលក្នុងគម្រោង AgriSud រយៈពេលកន្លងនេះមកខ្ញុំនឹងបានរៀនបានចេះ
Het gaat er vooral om dat we het voedsel weer in eigen handen krijgen, dus het voedselsysteem weer in eigen handen krijgen. En dat is een hele grote strijd, omdat je dat ook op politiek niveau voor elkaar moet zien te krijgen. Omdat de regels heel vaak in het voordeel van multinationals werken en heel vaak in het nadeel van consumenten en voor kleine boeren.
We designed our food forest inspired by Ernst Götsch, in which we have multiple layers of annuals, perennials, shrubs, fruit trees that offer support to one another.
We are creating a micro-ecosystem that's very resistant to disease and environmental impact. Just like starting a no-till garden, we give our plants a good start and mulch them using wood chips, as it takes longer to decompose. The main difference is that most of these plants will be perennials.
On a south-facing slope, we normally plant bigger trees higher and smaller shrubs lower, making full use of the sunlight. In our case, the canopy layer is formed by walnuts, Chinese chestnuts, and hazelnuts. We decided to plant the medium trees in a polyculture orchard for a much easier harvest and maintenance. These can be apple, pear, cherry, plums, mulberry, apricots, quince, nectarines, etc. Next layer will be columnar fruit trees, followed by shrubs such as blueberry, blackcurrant, blackberry, raspberry, gooseberry, aronia, haskap, cranberry, goji, thaiberry, sage, and others.
In between these layers, we can grow some root crops such as yacon, potatoes, oca, peanuts, horseradish, or garlic. The ground cover can be made with strawberries and pumpkins, and some climbers can also be used such as grapevine, kiwi, and runner beans.
Annual plants can be mixed in between as well, such as beetroots, turnips, dwarf corn, cherry tomatoes, swedes, leeks, fava beans, zucchini, and orange.
What's amazing is that what if the work we did was the vital work necessary to heal our planet in these times?
A syntropic system mimics natural patterns, allowing it to develop in a normal way. In a food forest, we apply mulch to combat emerging weeds, and we make use of the edge effect so that bigger plants offer protection and support to smaller ones in a symbiotic way. All kinds of plants and shrubs are intermixed to make use of this effect and keep maintenance down to a minimum. These systems support themselves. It's very important to prune or coppice your system and use the organic material as mulch.
Once the food forest is well established, because there is enough shade, we can integrate mushroom production into the system.
Have you tried doing these techniques elsewhere instead of here?
Yeah, at our countryside we have another place and it went also as well, almost as well as here, and it's all perfect. We're starting to grow mushrooms now, and it's gonna be a promising year for us.
I'm really excited about the future.
Permaculture should be the future.
There are many ways of making compost, and everyone can do it at their own pace, depending on time, needs, and resources. What's important to know is that there are 4 main ingredients in different proportions: green, brown, black, and water. Where green is any fresh organic matter, brown is dry, and black is manure, compost or comfrey as activator.
first argument in favor of agroecology is an argument that concerns the resilience of food systems and their delinking from fossil energies. Secondly, agroecology is important because it is a way to maintain and improve soil health. By the right combination of plants, by using animals in order to fertilize the soils in combination with the use of leguminous plants and trees that can capture the nitrogen with their leaves and re-inject them in the soils, we can reduce our need for nitrogen-based fertilizers, and we can preserve the health of the soil much better.
Fast compost is made by adding these ingredients in layers and turning the pile like this. A huge benefit is that it heats up so much that any unwanted seeds would burn up, so they cannot germinate. If you do not have the time to make this commitment, you can simply add less layers, less water, and turn the pile at your own pace, checking the temperature from time to time.
This is one of the simplest forms of compost toilets that exist. You sit on it and go poop. And you can use toilet paper, just like a flush toilet too. But instead of flushing, you then take a dry substance like shredded newspaper, leaves, or soil to cover it up. And this masks the smell completely. It's a box built out of repurposed wood with some screws, a toilet lid, and 2 5-gallon buckets. When the bucket is full, you then move it to the actual compost step. You compost human waste just like you would kitchen scraps and yard waste, in a compost pile. Micro and macroorganisms, that's bacteria and insects, break it down into its simplest components. This form of compost is called humanure, for human manure. Humanure can be done in multiple ways, but it should always be composted first. Composting kills disease organisms like parasites, hepatitis, cholera, and typhoid. I do active composting, which heats the pile up to 120 to 150 degrees. This heat kills off everything that could make a person sick. Passive composting will get the job done too, but with the lower temperatures, you've got to let it compost for a whole year. I've had dozens of people over, and everyone's amazed at the complete lack of smell. When composting is done properly, with poop or not, it will not stink. All of the nutrients in our waste are wasted when we use a flush toilet. Humanure returns the nutrients to our soil so we can grow food with it.
An alternative to composting is to actually start a garden bed with these raw ingredients. This is called a lasagna garden. You can start in fall, even without digging, by using different layers of mulch materials in the fall until you reach about 30 centimeters in thickness, adding water in between. In spring, the new formed beds are ready to be planted. Mulch is a protective layer on top of the soil which can perform multiple functions. Heavy rain can compact the soil, so mulch acts as a buffer zone in which water percolates slowly into the ground, minimizing or eliminating the need to till.
Doesn't have the chance to evaporate the water from the ground. This way, we don't need to irrigate.
We can allow the soil to capture the moisture better. we can reduce erosion, and we can create shade for the plants.
Mulch can be any organic material such as straw, dry leaves, hay, bark, sheep wool, wood chips or compost.
Local resources are the best resources.
Oh la la, yeah, I've never seen a mulching before. It is my first permaculture farm.
As it breaks down, it offers nutrients and supports soil life, adding fertility. The protective layer combats erosion, protects the soil from freezing, and eliminates most weeds.
I'm a scientist, but I would like to pose this question to you. Agroecology, why do we need a movement? We need the help of everybody in changing the food system. Everybody eats. I hope I have shown you the importance of being engaged in the agroecological movement to enable this change.
In no-till gardening, planting techniques depend on the type of system you choose. When direct seeding, you simply use less mulch. Uncover a patch and seed accordingly, after which you can reapply a thin layer on top to add some protection. This is also a good method to grow seedlings in the end of spring. Once the plants grow enough, simply transplant or thin out excess and reapply mulch accordingly. To plant the seedlings, simply open the mulch to be able to fit in the plant in the soil, after which you can adjust the mulch back into shape, leaving some space for the plant to access sunlight. On a flat patch or slightly raised bed, you can uncover the mulch, lightly aerate the soil, and use a tiller to prepare the bed. You can use a yang seeder in rows to seed and water until the plants are big enough to apply mulch.
Biointensive farming is a way to maximize food production in the least amount of land. This is a low-till method, usually done with a tilther. It requires a lot of compost and light aeration of the soil using the broad fork.
The most beneficial part of farm school for me was probably visiting farms, and not only visiting them but hearing people's visions for farms and going through the process of creating a vision for a farm. Speaking to real farmers in the community was incredibly inspiring as well as helpful for real life situations. What are they actually dealing with? And gaining inspiration. Yeah.
Usually used in commercial vegetable farms, the plants that are being cultivated have a high market value per pound and are fast growing with a period between 20 to 60 days to maturity.
A new vision is coming and new brief, and yes, it's always optimistic to have a design, a way to go. And if no, we know what we have to do, what we can do, how can it be for after, I think they will be motivated. Yeah.
In one bed, several successions can be achieved per year, maximizing space.
ចេះដាំដំណាំឆ្លាស់ហើយលក់ទៅសន្តាគារយើងមិនបាច់ចំណាយពេលក្រោកទៅលក់នៅអត់ល្ងុយយើងលក់នៅក្នុងប្រទេសហើយចេះផ្លាស់ប្ដូរមុខបន្លែគ្នាយើងចេះរៀបចំវេចខ្ចប់បានស្អាតចំណាក់កាត់បន្ថយផ្លាស្ទិកហើយក៏បន្លែយើងក៏សុវត្ថិភាពទាំងអ្នកដាំសុវត្ថិភាពទាំងអ្នកហូប
Many individuals can help support the vision.
We use a lot of biodiversity to create a strong, resistant, polycultural system that produces abundant and healthy food. We use companion plants like this French marigold to help against root disease and unwanted insects.
They're beautiful. They supply nectar and pollen for bees, and they feed the soul of people.
Mis hijos tal vez no sepan mucho de plantas, pero yo trabajando aquí yo puedo enseñarles a ellos qué tipo de plantas, para qué sirven y qué beneficios tienen también.
Some plants fix nitrogen into the soil, while others give support for climbers. Other plants are quite low and provide ground cover, while others are big and give shade. Insect repellent plants can be used such as garlic, nettles, horseradish and rhubarb. The more you mix, the more you learn.
ពីមីបើយើងប្រើជាក្រូស៊ីននេះគឺវាល្អទាំងអស់គ្នាដើម្បីសុខភាពហើយនឹងកាត់បន្ថយពីជំងឺនិងសត្វកតាផ្សេងៗ
Notre vocation est de lutter contre la précarité, contre la pauvreté, par la création et l'accompagnement de très petites exploitations et entreprises agricoles familiales qui s'intègrent dans les circuits économiques. Ici à Simrip, le projet aura permis de soutenir 820 familles et de produire par an 1008 tonnes de légumes, 200 tonnes de paddy, 85 tonnes de produits d'élevage. Et d'une manière générale, une augmentation de 25 à 30% de la production par rapport à la situation initiale.
There are guilds that support each other, and then there are guilds that thrive next to each other with no problem. Another way to make use of guilds is to plant crops with a short days to maturity, very close to crops that take longer to grow, thus maximizing space. This way you can harvest what is ready, giving space for the rest.
We need to find ways to work with nature instead of working against nature. That is what agroecology is about.
I think that the redevelopment of some of the indigenous food plants as a serious part of garden agriculture to sustain people is a long-term project. Is it cultural appropriation for me to be planting those plants?
Muchos tipos de plantas medicinales o plantas que podemos utilizar así en la vida diaria que comúnmente pues en la ciudad no podemos ver, ¿no? Y aquí lo que me gusta es como aprender este tipo de plantas para poder ocuparlas, saber cuáles eran los nombres antiguos, como en maya, ¿no? De esas plantas que nuestros abuelos utilizaron para hacer medicinas.
Hugelkultur.
This is practically burying large piles of wood to increase water retention in the soil. The porous structure of the wood acts like a sponge when it decomposes underground. In the wet seasons, the wood can absorb enough water to support plants throughout the dry season. When built correctly, huge culture beds can last up to 30 years.
We need change. And for this, we need knowledge, we need practice, and we need movement. We have knowledge from farmers and also from scientists, but we need more. We need more scientists engaged in agroecology.
We staan hier in transitieprocessen waarbij geldt dat elke keer zaaien met wat zij dan noemen semillas criollas. Dus niet de GMO-zaden, maar de zaden die ze altijd gebruikt hebben. Dat is een daad van verzet. Elke consument die je overtuigt van de waarde van agro-ecologisch voedsel is een daad van verzet. En zo heb je overal deze vormen van verzet en die verbinden zich in toenemende mate en dat kunnen we hele sterke bewegingen hebben.
These gardens are created making raised beds on contour. Every bed has a ditch above it. This is a passive irrigation system that needs to be mulched. When you make them, the soil from the ditch will form the raised bed, which can be up to 1 meter high. These are called swales, and the water comes in naturally from the rain. This system requires no additional irrigation because the water travels slowly into the beds and even travels up.
How is water flowing across that landscape? Where is it coming from? Where is it going to? How do you catch it? How do you design your rows? Farm school gave me those things, gave me those tools, put them in my box. And more so, farm school gave me the practical, how do you find a market? How do you assess whether what you're going to grow on that piece of land is going to be profitable? And farm school gave me that tool to be able to find those markets, to be able to assess whether my farm business idea would make money before I start farming. I see this site as a platform to getting to my ideal farm, which has flowers, which has a U-pick berry, which has produce growing, which has some sort of a basketry component to it, which has a gathering place for people to come to. That's amazing.
In our case, the gardens are in a swampy area where water retention is high, so we let the ditches unmulched. In a more arid situation, you can add wood in the trenches to retain moisture. If you keep your beds constantly mulched, no further tilling is needed. These are permanent garden systems that you don't have to dig every year. Don't need to irrigate or pull out any weeds. This is how they look like in the spring. They are covered with hay to protect them from drying, compaction, and weed invasion.
When people see the amount of water that come off their roofs into the water and are able to irrigate all season with that, it's kind of mind-blowing. And when they see lizards running around, they get so excited. Even when we drop the plants off, when we're first starting a design and it's like they're in their pots and a butterfly lands on one of them, like people are giddy about it.
Permaculture people are containers or models that are on this emergent edge of showcasing what's possible, providing livelihood opportunities for people to provide meaningful services that are contributing to the benefit of people and planet.
This is how they look like in the summer. If the mulch is less than normal, simply add more on top. Usually, we remulch once in the spring, once in the summer, and once in autumn. It took us 2 days to make one swale using our hands, and 6 hours to make 6 larger and longer ones using the excavator. This is a very good use of fossil fuels because once made, they are permanent.
vreme, ajunse pe o câmpie plină de flori, unde era numai primăvară. Florile te îmbătau cu mireasma lor, cu toate că parcă nu se îndurau să părăsească asemenea mândrețe de câmpie cu primăvară veșnică pe ea, porniră din nou mai departe.
Agroecology is important because it's a low-cost way of producing food. And for farmers living in remote areas, working on marginal soils, it is very important that they learn about techniques that can allow them to produce more for less, invest less in food production, to depend less ultimately on the markets for their ability to capture a decent profit for their production.
También me gusta que aquí todo lo que comemos pues viene del huerto, ¿no? O sea, está fresco. Es como la tiendita de la casa que echas pues una semilla y puedes cosechar todo lo que necesites para poder comer, para tener una vida más saludable. Porque desde la comida es así como el reflejo de uno, ¿no? O sea, lo que uno come es como pues lo que vas a hacer, ¿no? En tu futuro, con tu cuerpo. Y pues teniendo así un huerto es donde vas a tener pues la mejor comida, ¿no? Donde no va a tener pesticidas, donde todo es orgánico. Pues más que eso, pues también saber el regresar a la tierra, ¿no? Recordar nuestra memoria ancestral del por qué estamos aquí en la tierra. O sea, el trabajo no es nada más como hacer algo así como construir, ¿no? O sea, edificios, sino es construir desde la tierra, ¿no? Desde volver a regresar a ella como era antes, sembrando. Necesitamos como regresar a esa conciencia que pues siempre hemos tenido, que solo está dormida. Entre todos se puede construir un mundo mejor.
Around the world, this issue with permaculture and cultural appropriation is a little bit of a hot topic because everywhere in the world, permaculture acknowledges indigenous and traditional people as the big source for what we need to do in the future.
ជីវភាពគ្រួសាររបស់ខ្ញុំក៏វាក្រិនជាងមុនឲ្យបានជោគជ័យខ្ញុំក៏ខំប្រឹងដើម្បីធ្វើបង្ហាញកសិករនៅក្នុងភូមិឲ្យគាត់ធ្វើតាមដើម្បីរកប្រាក់ចំណូលបានជាប្រចាំចំណេះដឹងដែលខ្ញុំបានចេះមកខ្ញុំចាផ្សព្វផ្សាយដល់កសិករក្រៅដើម្បីឲ្យគាត់ធ្វើតាមបានប្រាក់ចំណូលពីការធ្វើអាជីវកម្មកសិកម្មក្រូស៊ីហើយខ្ញុំចំណេះដឹងនេះខ្ញុំនឹងបានផ្សព្វផ្សាយដល់អ្នកចិត្តភូមិផងនេះឲ្យគាត់ធ្វើដូចខ្ញុំដើម្បីរកប្រាក់ចំណូលចំណេញច្រើនហើយនឹងមានតម្លៃខ្ពស់នៅទីផ្សារគេទទួលស្គាល់នៅសប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃនេះព្រោះយើងធ្វើជាបន្លែសុវត្ថិភាពគេនឹងទិញច្រើនហើយប្រាក់
Nuestra organización es una de las que en el litoral ecuatoriano realmente trabaja de manera seria en el tema de agroecología, agricultura orgánica y comercialización justa de productos del agricultor y consumidor.
Los africanos forman también una ronda con la noche de la mano. Tingo, tiringu, tango, tiringu, te pasa una linda alegría.
Estarnos en una feria de productores, de agricultores, pero orgánicos, solamente orgánicos, agroecológicos.
In many of my missions, I see very interesting examples of local food systems being rebuilt, with consumers being more active, linking with producers, with the support of municipalities, for example, and identifying ways how local resources can be better used to shape food systems that become more sustainable and fair, both for poor consumers and for producers who have right to remunerative prices.
So it's early November here. We're approaching the final stages of our season, harvesting whatever is left and doing a bit of garden maintenance, a bit of a cleanup really. I'm looking at this black radish right here, and one of the advantages of working with a swale type system where you're harvesting the water is that you can clean up your vegetables really simple. So I'm just washing it up just generally, and so more than half of the job is done. So now just cut the branches, the roots, ready to go. On to the next, and so on until we finish up all of what is here. Do the chop and drop on everything. We have our green manure right here, which is the parts of the vegetables that we don't use will be left on the bed. So the plant is gone now, done its job. So this would be the chop and drop. Everything, all of what you see here, all the remains of the plants is biodegradable. So everything turns back into the soil, fertilizing it, and thus we don't need to add any more manure or like fertilizers or anything. Just the plants do their thing. We take all of the supports for the tomatoes and stuff. After that, we're gonna seriously mulch for the winter. We're going to add hay, and then in the spring we'll start planting seedlings again, and the cycle continues.
So what do we do with all this produce? It simply can't fit in a fridge. Some options include dehydration, pickling, storing in a root cellar, or selling. In a commercial operation, walk-in coolers can also be used, though they can be quite expensive.
También de colocar en la feria, ¿no? Una en un sector muy rico y otro sector muy pobre, que es un sector donde casas de caña, donde la gente tiene malas condiciones de vida. Sin embargo, la federación apuntó primero a hacer la feria en el sector más pobre, en el sector donde los niños necesitan más alimentos. Decidimos que la feria no solamente es que nosotros queremos comercializar un producto, sino tener una relación con una sociedad que también necesita el alimento. Claro, demostrarle que no es una mercancía común el alimento, que el alimento tiene un sentido, tiene una cultura atrás, tiene una familia campesina atrás.
Para ahuyentar al mandinga macumba macumbembe hay que tirar una flecha y bailar el candomblé. Hay tanto tiringu, tingo, tiringu, tango, tiringu, te pasa una linda negrita, más linda que no sé qué.
Por eso es que el clima, el ambiente en la feria es un ambiente festivo, es donde la gente conversa con los agricultores, donde comen de todo, los agricultores les regalan alimentos, se baila, se ríe, es una fiesta, ¿no? Porque es la fiesta de la soberanía alimentaria para nosotros, no solamente el acto de comercialización.
If you want to sell, it is crucial to have a post-harvest operation. This includes washing, drying, or hardening off some of the crops to enable them to store well.
The most profitable way to sell is through direct customers on a subscription basis, like restaurants that make weekly orders or weekly baskets. High-value crops are usually plants with a short days to maturity and usually don't store for very long. You can grow crops which have a high value per pound, such as salad mix, mesclun, baby carrots, microgreens, tomatoes, and kale, and stay away from crops which occupy a lot of space or take a long time to grow.
Gemeenschappelijk gebruikte goederen, in ons geval grond, die mensen kunnen gebruiken in ruil voor dat ze voor mijn winkel telen. En van de opbrengst daarvan krijgen ze ook weer de helft. Dus het is een win-win, waarbij mensen dus op een hele leuke manier gebruik kunnen maken van grond, van gratis compost, gratis organische mest. Maakt voor mij de arbeidskosten veel lager, waardoor ik kan overleven als kleinschalig bedrijf.
មិនបាច់ប្រើថ្នាំពុលមិនបាច់ប្រើជាតិគីមីទៅយើងចំណាយដើមទុនតិចទៅប៉ុន្តែយើងលក់ទៅឲ្យបានថ្លៃសមរម្យទី3យើងអាចថាយើងដាំឆ្លាស់មុខបន្លែគ្នាទៅលក់ស្រួលយើងដាំបានច្រើនមុខទៅយើងលក់បានប្រាក់ច្រើនចំណូលប្រចាំខែដើម្បីការផ្គត់ផ្គង់ដើម្បីការបង់សាលារបស់យើង
We're very happy to be using the Shape vegetables. They're much fresher than what we can get from the market. The quality is very good. There's little waste when you use them because you can use almost 100% of what you receive. And we like using them because we know that they don't use chemicals compared to most of the vegetables at the market. We would like to use as much of their product as possible. If they offered more variety, we would also purchase from them. So whatever they produce that we buy, we would choose to buy it from them over the market.
Warkal naikan drink of rum. Stack banana till lemon and come. Stack 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot man.
Kids planting seeds, there is no such thing as weeds. Help us to grow, Baza Ulmo School, whoa. Come take a look, read a book, you can cook. On the rocket, no more nuke. Come fast, no more stress, country life is the best. Kind, good design, intertwine, make it fine. Palm stay in the zone, 1 to 5, grow your own. Syllabalistic, jet, lyrical wisdom, check. A therapist, I beg your pardon, I'm a theorist on carbon, a humorist inside the garden, I will sharpen and darken, making tea using my grinder, singing louder, I empower and continue to inspire. Syllabalistic, jet, lyrical wisdom, check. Permaculture, permanent culture, eco building, yeah, why don't ya? In the garden, yeah, I'll mulch ya. Permaculture, permanent culture. Kids planting seeds, there is no such thing as weeds. Help us to grow, Baza Ulmo School, whoa. Come take a look, read a book, you can cook. On the rocket, no more nuke. Come fast, no more stress, country life is the best.